Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about ABAC and active defense and zero trust data security in action. We have a team from both RackTop and MANTECH here. So we'll go through a presentation, do a demo of the joint solution, and then have time for questions and answers at the end as well. So thanks for joining us. I'm Jonathan Halstuch. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder at RackTop. And then also from MANTECH, I have Chad Mathena, the Technical Services Director from the MANTECH Sentris team. So we're excited to tell you about what's going on today. So, what are the big data security challenges of today? One of the things, a lot of the organizations, especially within the DoD, but throughout the federal government, are trying to implement zero trust capabilities, right? One of the things that is imperative and key to having very secure data governance and data security is implementing data classification and labeling, being able to enforce those labels and use those as attributes and dynamic and conditional access controls beyond just role-based access or traditional permissions and ACLs. They both have a purpose, but together they provide even better security. And when we talk about zero trust, that's that constant trust evaluation to ensure that we're constantly evaluating trust to determine, do we want to allow users or applications to have access to this enterprise resource, which today we're talking about files or unstructured data. So we want to be able to weigh things like attributes about what device they're coming from, what location, what are they currently approved to see clearance-wise or compartment-wise, because those things change and are often difficult to deal with in traditional file shares and file storage environments that are just using ACLs or role-based access. We want to be able to support multi-category, multi-tenant environments, right? We want to be able to consolidate storage environments or file shares. We don't want to have dedicated file shares or storage environments for different programs or projects for separation. We want logical separation that's dynamic. This allows you to prevent having stranded resources and be able to quickly repurpose hardware and software to meet needs and respond to customer or mission requirements more rapidly. And of course, we need to continue to defend against insider threats and advanced persistent threats. In lower hygiene environments, of course, we're going to worry about things like ransomware and malware, but in the high hygiene environments and our most secure and classified environments, insider threats are very difficult to detect and stop, as well as advanced persistent threats because of the persistence of the threat and their nation state backing, and that make them a very difficult threat to detect, prevent, and keep out of your environment. And of course, if we're in the defense industrial base or even in the government working with the defense industrial base, ensuring that we secure controlled unclassified information, being able to label it, mark it, track it, follow it, and protect it against unauthorized use as well. And then we need solutions that can scale across the edge, the core of the data center we're used to, or work in the cloud. So that flexibility to put the data as close to the user or the application and meet the mission where it's happening. And so attribute-based access controls are really an evolution of access controls that's valuable in meeting these zero trust requirements and ensuring the most fine grain of controls, and helps with employing a multi-level security or multi-category security cyber storage environment. So this controls access based on the attributes, right? Who is accessing the data? So the user specifically, what program or project are they approved to see? What classification level are they approved to see? Not just, do they have permissions to this folder? Because things can change over time, and you want to be able to dynamically restrict access based on those attributes. You want to also know what machine or network they're coming from, because if that machine or network is not approved for that project or program or sensitivity level, but the users, we still want to restrict access and prevent them from accessing that sensitive data while they're on that. It's not approved for that, for instance. And all that is important when combining ACLs and attribute-based access controls. And with that, you're really creating a policy-based control framework that allows you to have dynamic access control to that data. And with this solution, there's no limit on the number of markings you can have per file. So it's really unlimited to even support the largest programs that might have many, many programs or caveats. And with the BrickStor solution combined with Sentris, we even have the ability to auto-label files in a folder, or what we call label inheritance, where essentially you can set a folder to have automatic labeling by labeling a special file that any new files placed into that folder will automatically be labeled with that. That's great for environments where you know everything in that file should be labeled that way, or maybe you have automated applications or processes that are dropping files into a folder and you don't want to have a user or something label it. You want it to automatically be labeled at that level. And so when you look at the DoD Zero Trust framework, you have the data pillar surrounded by all the other pillars because really data is the core of what everything's at. Even though when people think about cybersecurity, it's often network focused, the bad guys don't steal your network, they steal your data. And so we want to put the protections as close as possible to the data, and we want to make sure we're protecting that data against any sort of attack, whether it's manipulation or destruction or data exfiltration. And with BrickStor, our whole architecture as a NAS or file share is built around providing constant trust evaluation and that zero trust enforcement with our active defense capabilities. And we're going to talk about that. But to just put it at a high level, the difference between what the BrickStor security platform NAS does compared to any other file share is we're evaluating trust for each file operation that's happening over the protocol and on the file system in real time. If you think about a traditional NAS or file share, an admin would go in and give you rewrite permissions to a folder. You as a user would have rewrite permissions to that folder until another admin went in and removed those permissions. But with BrickStor, it's different. Admin still goes in and gives you rewrite permissions to that folder, but as you start to use it, we're evaluating trust in real time without sacrificing performance or user experience for trust. So if all of a sudden you start to read a ton of data at night, well, maybe you've become an insider threat and you're stealing data, or maybe your account's been compromised. We at least want to alert on that so somebody can investigate it and see what's going on. But if you started to read a bunch of files and encrypt them, well, that would look like ransomware. We'd not only want to alert on that, but we want to block you in real time, both your user account and your IP from accessing any further data, so that somebody could investigate that and take action. And the key is we're only blocking the malicious activity and the malicious user. All the other users can continue to operate. So you have that true cyber resilience. And we do this without putting any agents or anything on the endpoint. It's all done on the file share or on the file storage itself. And so this joint solution between MANTECH and RackTop, Sentris, and BrickStor SP is really meeting all of those key objectives around data for the DoD Zero Trust objectives, right? Conditional user access is dynamically determining should this user at this point have access to these files. We can catalog all the data that's being accessed and create a risk assessment. And so you're getting all that governance. We've talked about the ability to classify, label, and tag files. That's very important. Knowing, what the sensitivity and the importance or relativity of that document, and then tying that into the real-time monitoring and sensing, as well as the user entity behavior analytics that come with active defense as part of BrickStor. We have multiple levels of encryption and digital rights management. We're doing encryption at the drive or SAN level. We're also doing encryption at the folder level, all FIPS AES 256. And then again, we can do with Sentris file level encryption as well. So you have that digital rights management and individual level of encryption per file. So all throughout the stack, we have multiple layers of protection and security to meet these things. And of course, the data access control. And then when it comes to machine learning with BrickStor, we're constantly auditing everything that's happening per user, per machine. And so we can then create a pattern of life that can then be used to determine if things are out of the norm for a typical user's pattern of life, as well as detecting malicious malware and attacks that might be coming against your data as well. So how it works and what are the two pieces? So Sentris is the policy engine for ABAC. It's also integrated with Active Directory and can integrate with your system of record for clearances and accesses as well, and then provides the client label and classification tool. So that's a key part. And BrickStor acts as the secure, scalable file share or NAS, right? So if you're already a Sentris customer, you're using a Windows file server for that backend storage for your file data. What BrickStor does is it replaces that Windows file server as a true enterprise NAS with all the capabilities and features that you would expect in a NAS solution. And we're storing the attributes for each file as labels in the file system with the file. So as you move that file from folder to folder within BrickStor, we're maintaining those labels and also doing the dynamic access controls and enforcement of access control because we're talking to Sentris's policy engine to say, okay, this user authenticated to us from this machine. What should they be able to have, or what are the claims and labels they should see based on this current situation? And so if you look at the rudimentary way that it connects in the access logic, you basically have your user clients, right? They could be running Windows servers connecting or desktops running over SMB is the file protocol they're using to connect to the BrickStor. The clients often are going to be connected to Active Directory or in the domain, as well as BrickStor is connecting to Active Directory to authenticate users. So user authenticates the BrickStor. We have those credentials. We validate those credentials against Active Directory to determine the ACLs and what files and folders they should have access to. And then we go a step further and we evaluate their attributes against the policy server. So we send that request to the Sentris server. It comes back and says what claims are approved for, and based on that, you'll get the Venn diagram of the least amount of things that they should be able to see. So if they have access to the file, but they don't have the attribute that's required, they're not going to see those files. So just taking a step back, the BrickStor, as I mentioned, is a software-defined NAS with enterprise features. So it has the ability to support both the major file protocols, both SMB and NFS, up to the latest and greatest variants and versions, as well as S3. And you can use a BrickStor to access the same file via all three of those protocols or just one protocol. It's up to you how you want to access each directory. And that means that if you are using it for Sentris and maybe some of your stuff is ABAC, but other stuff is things like virtual machines running NFS or things like that, you can use the same environment to be able to run, virtual infrastructure, file shares, Linux file shares. So it's not just limited to Sentris. It can be a true enterprise NAS running all of your capabilities. It has storage efficiencies like inline compression and deduplication. It has multiple levels of encryption, as I mentioned, as well as built-in key management. And then we also have data protection policies. Those data protection policies set how frequently we are taking snapshots and how long we're retaining those snapshots. And of course, those snapshots can be replicated to one or many other instances of BrickStor, which can be used for your disaster recovery and coup plan. And it's important to note that, the way you protect against a natural disaster is very different than how you protect against a cyber attack, which is really a man-made attack. And so you need to have both capabilities in the product, and we address those both as well. And then we have our transparent data movement or TDM capability, which I have a slide on, which allows you to tier data from the primary tier of storage to a more economic tier of storage, like an S3 object store, which could be on-prem or in the cloud. So as organizations look to leverage the cloud economics, this capability allows you to do that economically without changing the user's workflow and still having all of the same security and attribute-based access controls. And then we have our immutable capability, which gives you an active air gap or cyber vaulting capability and creates a separation of duty between the storage admin and the users even. So basically a very useful capability when it comes to securing log data to prevent them from being overwritten or destroyed and creating that separation of duty between storage admins and vault owners. And then everything you do on the system is audited, both the system administrators changes to the system, as well as users and applications changes and interactions with all the data. And then, of course, our active defense capability, which is patented, is what actually does that zero trust enforcement to respond to that user behavior activity that's suspicious or malicious. BrickStor can be deployed in one of four ways. It's the same software no matter how you deploy it. So it can be deployed as a total turnkey appliance with the software and hardware in an all-flash or hybrid deployment model. And that's very popular in a lot of federal deployments. But it can also be deployed in our SAN gateway mode, where basically we install our software onto x86 compatible servers that sit in front of the SAN storage, and we take capacity off the SAN via iSCSI or fiber channel and then present out the storage capabilities through those controllers and just leverage the existing capacity on those SANs. And then the third way would be as a virtual appliance. It could be deployed as a virtual machine on your favorite hypervisor, VMware, KVM, et cetera, or even on hyperconverged infrastructure. We are Nutanix ready, for instance. or in the cloud. So we can actually deploy virtual machines in the hyperscalers as well. And because it's the same software, you can manage it from a single pane of glass, no matter how many instances you have. And you can have a virtual instance replicate to a physical instance or vice versa. So it's really the same software, just running in different form factors for different needs and requirements. From a use case perspective, there's a wide variety of use cases BrickStor has been in use today. So all the way from your traditional network file shares and home directories to streaming ISR data, to AI ML, or to big archives, right? And depending on how you tailor the hardware or you're using a virtual machine, that'll dictate the performance and scale of what you can do. But it can scale as a virtual machine, from a terabyte up to multi-petabyte, many, many petabyte scale as a physical turnkey appliance as well. So Hub is the user interface that's used to manage BrickStor. It supports multi-factor authentication. And as I mentioned, almost if you're used to like vCenter, Hub can be installed on a central machine and then used to manage multiple instances, or you can connect directly to the BrickStor, and there's an instance of Hub running on each BrickStor that you can use to manage that way as well. So Active Defense is really the key feature within BrickStor that gives it its zero trust capability. And this is running multiple assessors looking for different behavior types, things like privileged access abuse, ransomware, excessive file access, anomalous behavior. And then you can decide what you want the enforcement action to be. So you can have it just alert, or you can have it actually block the user account or block the user account and the IP, or just the IP, depending on what you want to do. And then it also has an incident workflow that allows you to basically take action, investigate what's happening, and then remediate the incident. So if something like happens where somebody destroys data or deletes data, it also gives you the quick button, which you'll see in the demo, to restore those files back from the immutable snapshots to the exact pre-incident version of the file. It acts like a DVR. So essentially, right before we know when the incident happened and we have the user behavior auditing, we can rewind just the files that were affected to the pre-attack and that were affected by the attack to the pre-attack version of that. And all of this information can be fed into Splunk and other tools that you might have as well. And as I mentioned, we have our user behavior analytics. So we're capturing the user account that's being used, as well as the client IP, the file operation type. Is it a read, a write, a delete, permission change, all of that, and then the full file path. And this log data can be forwarded to a centralized logging solution, but you can also use the user interface of Hub to investigate things too. So you can do searches to see, hey, I'm interested in what this particular user did, or maybe you're searching for a particular file that seems to have gone missing. You can just search for that file. It'll show you where it is and who moved it and when it moved and all of that as well. So it's a very valuable tool, both from a security aspect, but also from a general IT administration aspect too. And another use case for hygiene where it plays well is that you might have a access control list that's very wide open, but nobody's actually accessing that data. And so you can determine that nobody's accessed the data by looking at the activity over the last 90 or 120 days for that data set and seeing who are the users that access it. And if nobody's there, maybe you want to turn it off just in case someone's account gets compromised. This will eliminate the blast radius should that happen as well. And then our TDM capability that I mentioned, this allows you to tier data from that primary tier of storage and put it on a more economical tier of storage by first, we encrypt the data with keys you control and then push it to that object store or other NFS storage that maybe doesn't have the security and auditing that you need. But because the users are still going through BrickStor as part of the data plane, everything's being audited. You're getting all those same protections. All the labels and metadata travels with the data as well. So to the user, it's seamless. They still go to that same folder and they access that same data. This is valuable in environments where you can think of like an HSM or where you have tons of data, but you have a lot of data that maybe is not accessed frequently. And so you want to tier that off to a more economical tier of storage as well. And then we have integrated compliance reports to make that ATO seamless. We have many customers that move to us because of the simplicity of demonstrating that compliance to auditors, going through things like the JSIG RMF. And we actually have data sheets and collateral that show how BrickStor and the solution meet those different requirements of the RMF and the control, and where to get the demonstrating evidence for that as well. And then we also have built-in key management with the encryption. So we mentioned the levels of encryption we support. We also can act as the key manager, or we can talk to an enterprise KMEP key management server to request the keys and rotate the keys as well. So if you don't have a KMEP server, you can just use the one out of the box. But if you do, it'll connect to that and seamlessly request keys when needed, when you're enrolling drives or when you're creating new data sets. So now I'm going to switch over and show you a demo of the joint solution in action. So let me switch.
Let me first start off by saying that there's no classified data here. This is just a sample lab environment. So everything you're seeing is just a lab, no classified data. And I have 3 remote desktops here. So I have one where I'm connected to the Sentris server, where I'm accessing the portal and hub. And then I have 2 Windows desktops where I'm logged in as user 1 and user 2. You can see on the banner, user 1 has the top secret and the accesses, and user 2 has just secret up to secret, which matches what we see in the Sentris portal here for user 1 and user 2. And I used the airport trigraphs as the programs, and so you'll see that user 2 just has the DC region trigraphs in this case. So now I'm going to flip over to the hub user interface on BrickStor, and you can see you can provision all sorts of data sets, right? On the same BrickStor, you could have SMB, NFS, S3. You can access the same files over all 3 protocols as well. But today we're focused on SMB and ABAC. So I'm going to go down to this ABAC panel and show you all of the data sets that are configured to work with ABAC, and in this particular case, Sentris. And so we've already configured Sentris as our ABAC provider. That's actually very easy to do to configure a provider. You just have to provide the IP of the web server and the credentials. But we've already done that, so we don't need to do that now. So now I'm going to show you how easy it is to create a new data set. So I'm going to go in here and create a data set called webinar. And you're going to see I have the options here. I'm going to add data set encryption. I'm going to stick with the general file systems storage profile. And I'm connected to Active Directory, as we've mentioned. So I'm going to give domain admins full control. And I'm going to give domain users read-write privileges by default. Now, we also have ABAC enabled. So we're already, for this data set, going to connect to Sentris. So first it'll evaluate if you have the ACLs to even see those files and folders. And then it'll next evaluate your attributes. If you don't have ACLs, it'll stop right there. If you have the ACLs but not the attributes, you won't be able to access it either. We're not going to turn on label inheritance for this particular demo, but with label inheritance, basically you can choose for each folder what you want files to automatically be labeled as when they're written or created there. So for maybe automatic logging or situations where you don't want to have to label it each time and everything in that folder should have the same markings, you could turn that on, and that happens for each folder, and you can choose a different label or marking for each subdirectory as well. So it's very configurable. I'm going to turn on access-based enumeration, which means if you don't have access to that file, it will be hidden, so you wouldn't see a file name for a file you don't have access to or shouldn't have access to. We have quotas and reservations. Quotas limit the maximum amount of data you can put in a data set, and then reservations are the opposite. If thin provisioning it reserves that space for that data set. We have our active defense automatically turned on for the data set as well, which is looking for ransomware, privileged access abuse, as well as excessive file access for reads, writes, deletes. In this particular situation, we're using some static settings. I've had very low settings in order for demo purposes to be able to trigger things, but you can configure them on a per data set basis. And then you also have long-term analysis, which is doing AI and machine learning to figure out what each user's normal behavior looks like as well, which is more dynamic. We also have our data protection profiles. That sets how frequently and how long you're retaining the data sets for. So if in this case, I've already selected the general file system, so that storage profile automatically has a data protection profile associated with it, which you can see here. You could choose a custom policy for a particular data set or modify it, but we're just going to go with that for now. And then we're going to replicate this data set to another BrickStor for our DR or COOP type protection. So I'm going to replicate it to another instance in this BrickStor. So now on the next page, I get a summary of all of the settings I'm going to use, and I'm going to go and create that share. And from here, I'm going to pull up the Explorer window, and we're going to actually see those shares. So we're going to see that now we have that new webinar share has been added to that. And so we have all those lists that match that. Now I'm going to flip over to user one, who has all the access, and they too will see that data set. I'm going to expand that. And so now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a new file. So I'll just, for this purposes, create a top secret webinar document. And now I'm going to use the Sentris marking tool to actually go ahead and label that file. So in this particular case, I'm just going to choose the marking, but you could, if you desired, have it also do keywords and rule search to have it help classify the tool automatically, classify the document for you as well, based on keywords and rules. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that file. I can see it successfully marked it. And when I refresh it, I also can see that the Sentris marking is applied to indicate that it's a marked file. You can also view the markings if you go to Properties under the Sentris tab. You'll see that it's marked as a top secret sample as we marked before. Now I'm going to flip back over to user 2 who only has up to secret. And this time I'm going to go into that same share. And as we would expect, that file is not visible to us because while we have access and the ACLs to see the folder and the files, we do not have the attributes for that particular file since it's top secret and we only have up to secret. So it's hidden from us and we can't view that. And so all of our activity has been tracked as well. So one of the great features of BrickStor is the user behavior auditing. So I'm going to switch back over to this hub panel and dive into this a little bit. So all of that activity that's happening is being monitored with active defense. So we can go to our UB dashboard and we'll actually see all of the activity that's been happening. So we can see the active users, obviously user 1 and user 2, even the administrator is accessing stuff. We can see the active data sets, what they're looking at, what the top and most active data sets are as well. But we can also drill down and see a report of exactly what's happening in real time too. So if I want to get a report of what everybody's doing, I can do that right now. And I can see all that activity that we talked about, right? We see user 2 accessing that webinar data set. We can also filter and see other things based on what's happening. So maybe I want to create a particular report that's based on just what user 1's activity is. I can do that as well too. So I'm going to go to the raw operations for this all time. If I wanted to, I could, as I mentioned, select just user 2 or user 1. So in this case, I'm just going to do user 1's activities. And I could limit it to a specific IP address. I can also, if interested, limit it to a particular directory or file path. I can also use this to look for a file or folder that I might be interested in. And I can look at time of day. Maybe I'm only interested in the time of, after hours for user 1, or maybe I want to see all their activity. In this case, I'm just going to do all their activity, click user 1. I go and open that report, and I can see all of the activity for user 1 going into the webinar folder, creating the files, renaming and replacing, right? I created that and renamed it. So all of that becomes visible and accessible there. And we can even filter it by write operations or read operations as well. We also have the ability to detect and stop incidents or malicious behavior. So let me flip over. In this case, I want to show you when a user performs something malicious or inappropriate. So I'm actually going to go back to user 1. I'm going to go to a different data set that has a lot of data in it, which is the Sentris data set here. And I go over into the archive files here. And I'm going to actually go ahead and delete all the files in this data set. What we're going to see is that it's actually going to disconnect me because I've exceeded my excessive deletes for this. So what happens is I'm now disconnected as user one. I can't access that data set anymore. And if we go back over to this environment, we're going to see there's an incident that's been created. So we go into here. Also, this could fire off a webhook to Teams or Slack. So you don't have to be in this environment to see that there's an issue. It's going to send an alert to whatever tool or dashboard you're using. We can see in the top there's a blocked user and host. And if I go into the details here, I can see that user one has been implicated in this, the client IP they're coming from, and what's happening. So I can acknowledge this and let people know I'm investigating it as an admin. All of this activity is also being recorded down in the notes and history. So this can be exported as a report later for the incident. Now we can see we're blocking my account and IP, and we can also see what files were affected. So if we go into here, we can see all those files that were affected from that data set. Now, automatically the solution recommends restoring these files if that was inappropriate, right? So right from here, we can select these files and it'll actually restore those files right to the live file system. So it'll do that without having to go figure out what was the right file. Because user behavior is tracking all of the activity of what's happening, we know which files were affected right before the incident, so we can restore those out of the immutable snapshots right before that. This works for destructive events like deletes or modifications. It also works for ransomware where somebody's encrypting all the files, where we'll remove the encrypted file and replace it with the pre-attack version right before the incident. So we've restored the files here. We go back to the view incident. Now we're still blocking that user one, but we're not blocking any of the other users. So other users can continue to operate. Just to show you that if I go to user two here, they still have the ability to access all those data sets and share. So if they go into, let's say that same Sentris folder, they will be able to access and see all that data, right? All that they're supposed to be able to see is still accessible. We're only blocking the bad user or malicious activity. So you have that cyber resilience too. So now once we're positive it's okay that user account's not compromised or we're fine with it, we can actually restore access for that user as well and unblock them. And then unblock here. And so now they will be able to access that information. I can close the incident out too. And if I go back to user one, they'll be able to once again access the data and see those files just like before. So very easy to do things like that. Also, we're detecting for things like privileged access abuse, as I mentioned too. So things where an admin is using stuff is something we want to be careful of in these high hygiene environments, right? So what we're going to do now is go in as an admin when we don't have a rule or a ticket saying I should be doing this and I'm using an admin account to do things that wouldn't really be appropriate for me to do without having a ticket and rule entered in here. So I'm actually going to go in here and start accessing this file. And right away, we can see incident created where that access for that file and the access for the right are popping up. So now, if let's say I'm doing stuff and I forgot to put a ticket in before, and maybe I'm supposed to be doing some sort of worker migration with that admin account, if we didn't pre-do it, we can also actually create an ignore rule to allow me to do that. So we can say, hey, I want to allow this behavior temporarily and have this auto expire after a period of time. So I'm going to be allowed specifically to do this, but only for the next hour, for say. And we're going to allow that. We can limit it to my specific client that I'm coming from and my particular account. It'll still all be audited, everything I'm doing. We're just not going to fire off an incident for that the next time that happens. And so we can create that and close the incident for that too. So not only do we have attribute-based access controls, but we have that zero trust enforcement to evaluate trust for each file operation. So things that shouldn't be done or are abnormal are immediately alerted upon, as well as with user behavior, you can quickly go back and review that as well. There's lots of other features to show you about Hub and BrickStor SP. And if you are interested, we definitely would love to show you in a further demo or call.
So one other thing I want to bring to your attention is our Jumpstart program, where you can actually deploy a full featured virtual machine instance of BrickStor SP. Does all the things you've seen, so you can try it out in your environment, make sure it works how you expect. And it also comes with 24/7 support. So if you're interested in it and you want to try it, it's a very lightweight and easy way to do it, and very easy to install in your environment too. So with that said, I want to open it up for some questions. So it looks like one of the questions we have is how do you handle false positives to ensure you don't get blocked for critical environments? So there is those rules. So depending on what's appropriate for your environment, you have the ability to not block anyone, or everything's granular, so it can be done on a per data set basis too. So you can have it so that it'll still create an incident and somebody can look at it, but it's not going to block the users. You'll be able to continue. If somebody did something like delete events, they're not blocked, but you'll be able to quickly restore those files when there is an incident. You can also put it when you first install it into an observe only mode. So you'll see what's happening. You'll see what would fire off an alert and what wouldn't. And sometimes that's also a good way to determine that, hey, maybe I have a bad thing set up. We've had customers where we deploy BrickStor in their environment and they find out that a bunch of accounts were created as domain admins that were just supposed to be regular users, for instance. So it helps with that whole hygiene improvement and risk reduction. Another question I see is, does BrickStor and ABAC work with VSS and restore a previous version? Yes, it does. So all the snapshots will show up as a restore previous version or VSS entity, so you can restore an individual file as a user for self-service. And that's also basically what we're doing when we restore from active defense to restore an individual file as well. And then how's BrickStor licensed? So for BrickStor, it's a subscription license. The more you purchase, the bigger the discount and the longer the contract. But the cool thing is you can divide up that capacity however you want. It's based on the usable capacity. So you could have, if you had 100 terabytes, you could cut it up into 10 VMs, for instance, or you could do, 50 terabytes in 2 physical or 2 virtual machines, whatever you want to do. So very flexible when it comes to that. Installing BrickStor is pretty quick. You can actually install BrickStor in under an hour, and most of our, installs where it's completely integrated in the network and physical install is in under a day, and that includes some basic training as well. And then let's see, do you have to install any Sentris app on the BrickStor? No, you don't install anything on the BrickStor. The BrickStor talks to the Sentris API or web server, and then that's how it communicates. So there's nothing that gets installed in the BrickStor itself. Does BrickStor UAM report and track Sentris label activity, like when they are being applied, removed, changed, etc.? And the current version, it is not doing that, but that is something we're looking at doing, and we want to do it in a way, because this came up as part of the design, so that we're not exposing labels and sensitivity things in an environment that we don't want it to see. So we're trying to figure out if we need to separate it or how we protect it, or if we just make it an optional thing. But that is in the roadmap plans. Can I use Sentris to secure artifacts for a CI/CD pipeline? Chad, you want to take that one, or?
Yeah, I'm sure you can. I mean, if you just mark them, with the Centris markings, depending on what you've set up for that, definitely it can do that.
Yep. And then one other question we have is, how do you get training on BrickStor? So actually, we have free training, which you can sign up for. We hold it at least monthly, and it's a remote hands-on lab type training that you can do. There's a link on our website that you can register for, and then it's open to existing customers and future customers as well. So in Windows File Share, you have to install protection for file shares. Without this app, how do you mark those files on BrickStor? So with BrickStor, essentially we're a NAS and we're aware of that. So with the file system, we're automatically know how to respond when the data set is set up with Sentris when we enabled ABAC and things like that. And so we know how to store the labels. And then we're also doing the enforcement and policy based on those settings when it gets configured, when we enabled ABAC, when we provision that share. You can also, after you created a share, you can turn that on as well. It's just the way we do it's just a little bit different than I think the way Windows File Share does it. Well, I appreciate everyone's attendance and all your time, and feel free to reach out to us. I put the contact info for both the teams at RackTop and MANTECH. You can reach out to either of us. And if you want to see a more of a demo and more capabilities, happy to do that and schedule that as well. So hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you.